Bang. Here we go, people. My next guest on the podcast, ex-Adelaide mountain bike rider turned energy geographer, Professor Dr. Tom Ptak. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for hosting me. It is a real honour to be here.
I'm so looking forward to this. It sounds like you have done so many interesting things on your 50-odd years on this planet.
That's right.
First question I ask everyone, though, if you could be an animal, what animal would you be and why?
An axolotl.
Oh, haven't had that.
Yeah, because my youngest daughter is obsessed with them. I think if I was one, she'd look after me.
That's a great way of looking at it, hey? Yeah, okay, yeah. Through the eyes of someone else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Brilliant. All right. We met riding mountain bikes in the mid-90s or so. Through the Inside Line, through the Adelaide mountain bike scene. Step back to that point in your life. Talk about Tom the mountain biker. How did you come into mountain biking? Tell us a little bit about that. Start there.
I was just thinking about that on the way over here. I raced BMX when I was, really young. And I used to work at a BP gas station just down at Glandore. And one day a Coke rep came in and he had a mountain bike in the back of his car. He was, doing some promotion. And I asked if he'd sell it to me. $50. Bought a mountain bike and then just, jumped on it and just absolutely fell in love with it. And back in the day, there was no suspension on very, very poor suspension. So we just would, and a lot less trails. Obviously, we just started riding our bikes. And, honestly, it was the most fun period of my younger years by a long shot. And, then I just, sort of came across the racing scene somehow and kept on, buying new bikes and thought, I'll just race, just see what happens. And just really loved competing. And one of the things I loved about it was the community. Really, really great group of people to be around. And
that's the community of specifically Adelaide, which was kind of turned into the Inside Line Mountain Bike Club, but it was the Adelaide mountain bike riders.
Yeah, I raced cross country as well. So I did downhill and I did cross country, but it was, a great group of people. Everyone was, you'd race and compete hard, but we're all friends and we all really encouraged each other and supported each other with racing. And it was, it was just a wonderful group of people, and it set me on the trajectory of, my current sort of life, which was, it spurred this, when you ride a mountain bike, you're not just riding a bike, you're exploring. And that it really, created this want to see more and get out and explore, and that's what sort of led me to go traveling for the very first time. And it was, racing and going and seeing new places and doing new things, and I just sort of wanted to do more and more of that.
So you were riding and racing here in Adelaide, and you'd go to a few interstate races as well?
Yeah, race the National Series races and go over to, Mount Buller and Mount Beauty and Canberra and places like that, and went up and watched the Worlds in Cairns. And we always, weaved in adventures. It was always a fun time, and seeing new places or, just doing new things. And it just sort of instilled this spirit of exploration in me. And I credit those days, mountain bike racing, as really launching me into the things that I've done since then.
Any particular, it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
We're talking 30-odd years ago now.
Correct.
Are there a few characters or a few people that sit higher in your mind's eye when you talk about and you think about those days?
Yeah, and some with real sadness too. Sean Bowden was, was very just a wonderful human. And I remember when I was in London, he was over there too, and he passed away. And that was, really, I guess, the first sort of person from that group of people. So that was, really hard to take. having been to his wedding just a year before. And Rob Merrison, I remember, so, when I linked up with people all around the world, Rob Merrison lived in England back in the early 2000s. Oh, he still lives there. We'd go out and ride our bikes around. Johnny Rockstar, Tyson Ballard, Chris Wildman and yourself and just everyone, really. It was, they were just great, such great times.
And at some point you thought, okay, I want to see more. I want to see beyond the shores of Australia.
Yeah.
And then you rode from Greece to Cairo or something. You rode 6,000 kilometres across the globe or something like that?
I did that. So my first trip was, I went to Africa in 99. My brother had gone to Africa a couple of times, and that was just always the place that I really wanted to go. And, I'd never been outside Australia before and bought a around-the-world ticket. My first stop was Cape Town, South Africa, and I basically had 3 months to get up into Kenya before I flew out to Europe. And here I was with my backpack. It's really when I started to become a geographer. A lot of what I saw was very confronting. I'd never, ever seen poverty before in my life. And I was, confronted with it pretty quickly. And, I just started asking a lot of questions about the world. I wonder, how it is that I'd had to lead such a privileged life up until that point, and people in other parts of the world certainly, just sort of struggling to survive. And that, I couldn't figure it out. I was really profoundly shocked by what I saw. And, but I was just out there observing and in later years looked back on it. That was the start of me becoming an academic, asking questions, being curious about things, maybe not having an answer, but trying to sort of understand them better. And that's really the essence of geography. The word geography is to write about the world, and to write about the world, you go out and explore the world. So, went to Africa and went and spent some time in Europe. I followed the 99 tour around, the first tour that Lance won. But I was young, just looking around at the world. And I went to London.
Were you this solo or were you with mates?
Different. Africa was by myself. I had a buddy come to Europe, Paul Reedy. We hung out and followed the tour around, and then he sort of left, and I met up with another guy, Ian McKenney, who was another Adelaide mountain biker. We just ran into each other in Amsterdam one night, sitting at a cafe, and I heard someone saying, "Oh, Tom," and I didn't know whether I was awake or asleep at that point. I turned around, some guy on his mountain bike's like, "Hey, Tom, how's it going?" We ended up hanging out for a couple months. And then I went to London, and this was the dot-com boom era. I'd had some experience working in banks in Australia, and you could just sort of get a job. And I worked for a small-scale investment firm, and then suddenly it was like, "Oh, do you want to work for Merrill Lynch," which was one of the largest investment banks? And I ended up doing sort of investment banking, asset management, living in London, just having an absolute blast. And, you could just sort of travel wherever you wanted. So I'd make a trip to Greece and Turkey and look around. And I went to India, and I was just sitting there in this I brought my mountain bike with me. I was just cruising around, riding around, and I was just sitting at this little shop drinking a Coke. And I see this guy just pull up on his mountain bike, and he had sleeping bags and stuff. And I was like, "Hey, man, how's it going?" He's like, "Good." I'm like, "Where are you from?" And he's like, "Romania." I was like, "Oh, where'd you ride from?" And he was like, "Romania." I said, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, through Afghanistan and Iran." And I was just like, that's cool. I want to do that. So I started thinking about what would be a trip that I would want to do. And the Middle East was a place that I, curious about. So September 2001, flew out to Athens, jumped on my bike, and I'm like, well, I'm going to ride to Cairo, I guess.
Go that way.
Yeah.
What bike are you riding? What are you preparing yourself with?
That was a Scott, just a hardtail, and panniers and everything, and a little Trangia stove, and September 2001, September 11 happened like a week into my trip. I probably one of the only people on the planet who didn't know about it for a couple of days. I was out camping, got back into some little town, and internet cafe days, checked my email and was like, oh my God. And everyone, my parents were like, well, you just have to come home and stop your trip now. And I was like, no way, I'm out here. But yeah, rode through Greece, through Turkey, into Syria, which was by far just an incredible country, the most generous people I'd ever met. They were just stopping on the road and, do you need any help? Where are you from? What are you doing? Where are you going? I'm like, I'm Tom for Australia. I'm riding to Egypt. Can we help you? Do you want to eat with us? Can we just talk to you because we don't see foreigners? They were just so warm, and it really, again, challenged my perspective because, I'd heard a lot about supposedly how things were supposed to be in the Middle East, although I probably didn't pay attention to them, and thought I'll go and find out for myself. And it was just immediately post-September 11 when the entire focus of the world was on this place. And I was just riding through there.
You were there.
Yeah. And, rode through Israel, rode my bicycle actually into the Gaza Strip. Places like complex places with long histories and contemporary conflicts that I was just trying to figure out. And halfway through that trip, actually, I took a diversion. I went to India for 4 months to backpack around, and I was up in the Himalayas just doing some volunteer work with the Tibetan refugee community where the Dalai Lama lived up there in Dharamsala. And I remember just teaching these, monks English, trying to help in some way, do something that made a positive contribution to someone's life. And at one point, some guy just turned to me and said, "Thank you, you've really helped me." And I was sort of shocked. It really made a lasting impression on me because I'd always, up to that point, lived my life just to do things that benefited me. And I never really thought I could be useful to someone else in a way that was, meaningful. And I thought maybe I'll go to university. I don't know what it is. I still really didn't have anything like a career path or anything. You got to go to uni, right? Because that's what everyone does.
You'd left the investment bank. You said, "I'm finished. I'm done." Like you weren't planning on going back in this trip.
No, I went back to London. I finished my trip in the Middle East, went back to London, and then sort of came back to Australia and went to live in Sydney, where I'd never lived before, to enroll in university at Macquarie University.
But that moment that came to you, or you think it came to you while you were travelling, you thought maybe, at that point you're just travelling, you're just exploring the world, enjoying the world.
Yeah, and again, being in India, again, I felt reminded of what had happened in Africa. There was just this, I just felt overwhelmed by the amount of poverty I saw, children, sleeping on the streets and it just feeling like it was so unfair and not wanting to do something in some way that could make some sort of positive contribution, but I had no idea what. Like, what could I do? I'm just one person. And so I thought, I'm not, really sure. I'll go back to Australia and go to university and work for some non-profit aid organisation or something. That's what I thought I was going to do.
Some sort of humanitarian efforts or something.
Yeah. I found the Tibetan refugee story very compelling because my father was a refugee. He was actually born in a concentration camp, one that was it was Bergen-Belsen, one of the biggest death camps in Germany where Anne Frank had died. And he was born there just shortly after liberation. But something about displaced people really spoke to me, and I just felt compelled to, do, I don't know, it just makes... when that person said, "Oh, you've really helped me in my life," it was a real, I'd never considered that, I could do something that would be useful, helpful for another human being before. So it just sort of inspired me. And I just went back to Australia, and I remember I found, I'd never really been good at school. It's hilarious. I was just in Melbourne at my father's house, and he brought me out my high school reports from Ranella East High School in the 90s. And I failed geography. And the teachers were saying, Tom is someone that has potential, but he just can't behave himself in class.
That's a classic, isn't it?
Yeah. So I found that the study of geography, human geography, what people do, where they do it and why, and what are the sort of implications of, their actions. And I thought that's exactly what I want to study. So came back, and enrolled in my bachelor's. I didn't get accepted straight away, so I had to do this sort of program to get in, take a few courses.
Did you finish school? Did you finish year 12 back here in Ranella East?
I finished.
You did get to the end of year 12?
I got to the end. I don't know if I passed.
Okay, yeah. Oh, most people don't even get there. The people sitting across from me.
I had this, I looked, my dad gave me this folder that I had, and it had a certificate saying Tom Ptak has been at Ranella East High School for year 12, and we wish him the best. And it didn't say anything.
That's it. There you go.
Yeah.
It's a nice exit.
But there is a point about all this that I'll loop back into mountain biking, is that, I didn't have a great sense that I would be able to do very good at I was untested, right? Hadn't been to school in, since the 1992 I finished high school. So I was very unsure of myself. Am I going to fail? Am I going to be a failure at this?
In academia?
Just a bachelor's, Okay, I'm what's called a first-generation college student. My parents didn't really go to university, and I was a non-traditional student, so a lot older. So I just started taking classes here and there and trying to figure it out. Really, it was really, really hard. It was very different than what I'd done before. And I went over to, something else that happened. I wanted to go to the United States. I met a guy traveling in India that was a mountain biker, and we hung out and did all this cool, went hunting tigers up in he's always in touch, and he came over to to Australia, and we hung around, and he said, if you can ever get over to the States, it'd be great. Lived in Washington State. And I walked past the study abroad office and thought, maybe that's a way to get over there. And so I got accepted to go to do an exchange program in Washington State, just over on the other side of the mountains from Seattle, and just had an incredible experience, mountaineering, climbing mountains, figuring out the American college system. And I remember just being in a professor's office one day, and he said, you should really consider graduate school. I said, what's that? He said, like going to do a master's degree. I was like, why? And he said, we get very, very few students like you. And I honestly thought he was joking. And then I just sort of didn't say anything, and he just said, sit down, and he said, you have, you're a little bit older, you've seen the world, but your work is, whenever we have a test, we get your paper, and all the professors have said this, we read it first, and then we grade everyone else's. I was so profoundly shocked by that, because I'd never really done well in school. But it wasn't until I found something that I was just so passionate about, and I found that I really loved learning, that I just went at it with everything I had. So I thought, okay. So I went, when I was there in that year, it was 2005, I went down to the University of Oregon, and they said, you should think about going to Oregon, and went down there one day, Eugene, Oregon, met the professors, very, very intimidating. These are some very, very just incredibly brilliant people. And just kept it in the back of my mind, and finished that year, and then went to Nepal and actually did some mountaineering in the Himalayas, climbed about 5 peaks right around near the Everest. region, and just, still went to Southeast Asia, was still just sort of like, this is crazy, now
Being a big kid.
Yeah, I'm just like, I can get to do all this stuff. It was fun. I rode through the Middle East. I went to Africa. I'm climbing in the Himalayas. I've been to the United States and studied there, and I was just sort of, what's next? So then I got through my bachelor's degree, and which in Australia is 3 years. And if you want to go to graduate school, you have to do a fourth year, which is called honours. And it's basically a master's degree in 1 year. It's a big research project. So I worked with the Tibetan refugee community in Sydney and then applied to graduate school. Just said, well, I'll just give it a go, at the University of Oregon, and got in. And they paid me. They were like, not only will you come here, we'll pay you to come here. I was just, that's crazy. So I went back over there in 2008 and thought, again, like, I'll just do a master's degree, like, and at some point through that process just found that I was like, everyone was asking me, go on and do a PhD. And I was like, what? That's impossible. I don't, and I suffered, I still do, from this thing called imposter syndrome. Like, you're not good enough to be here. You just sort of tricked your way in. And I was just like, at some point, someone's going to find out that I'm, shouldn't really be
Not special.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or, and then so I was like, really? I remember one day I sat down with this guy who became a real mentor to me. Brilliant guy. His name's Alexander Murphy. He's like undergraduate from Yale, top of the class, law degree from Columbia University in New York City, so both Ivy League schools, and then a PhD in geography from Chicago when it was the best department in the country. And he said, you could go on and do a PhD if you wanted. So I just thought, why not? I'll just see how far I can take this thing, right? This is like, I would have never expected to be here just a couple years ago. So and it was really hard for me. It was so, like, a lot of the students it came easier to them. So I had to work 2-3 times as hard as them to read the material, to write. And, graduated with my master's and then went into a PhD program. And I started thinking about energy. I thought climate change is this was 2010, is starting to become more noticeable. Energy is a big thing we need to figure out. And I was like, I knew nothing about it. So I'm like, I want to find out more about this. And spent 6 years studying it, went to China, lived in this really rural and remote part of China where they'd installed small hydroelectric dams to try to figure out, small energy systems, ways that you could, these people were basically had without electricity just up until a couple of years before I was there. And some of them didn't even have electricity yet. So I was just sort of seeing how it was able to change their lives.
How did you end up there? If you could have gone many places, what specifically drew you to that environment?
Yeah, so it's this part of China called Yunnan Province, and I did my master's again working with Tibetans in the United States, and I wanted to move away to do something else. And there are the 3 major rivers that come off the Tibetan plateau and cascade down through Yunnan. One is the Yangtze River. The next one over is the Lansangjiang, or in English, the Mekong. And then the one close to the border with Myanmar is called the Salween River, or the New River. And the Yangtze and the Mekong have all got huge amounts of dams on them. And the New River is actually free-flowing. And it was the last undammed river in this part of the world, and the Chinese government were planning on building dams. And I thought, that sounds really compelling. I want to go to this place, this real frontier. It's one of the most biologically diverse places in China, ethnically diverse, the edge of the Himalayas, lowland Southeast Asia. Sounds like an adventure to me, and I'll just go out there and figure out some stuff about the world, and sort of stumbled onto this amazing PhD project, but knew nothing, like didn't know how electricity was created, and didn't, couldn't speak Chinese. Had to go there and learn all that stuff and go up and live in this tiny village in the middle of nowhere. And
are you there with other people as well, other or Americans or Westerners, or
no, I was
just you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I had people come over and visit me. I started at the time I met the person who was to become my wife, so she came out at some point and stayed out in the village with me, and but yeah, it was just sort of out there in one of the most remote parts of China, just doing stuff. And after 5 years, came back and defended my dissertation and wrote a 500 page dissertation, and they gave you a doctorate degree.
And then you became Dr. Tom Ptak
Yeah,
after that.
it was very, it still seems unbelievable. This series of events that happened to me, and partway through my PhD, I just thought maybe I could pursue a career as a professor. And the point about mountain biking in all of this is that I always rode, and doing such intense work is very stressful. And for my PhD, I had to stand in a room for my defense with my 3 advisors that were my main committee members that were, brilliant people. One, my chair was Chinese, so I had to try to teach him something about China. And they basically grill you for a period of time. And not only do you have to be coherent, but you have to be able to explain complex problems and theories and what you've written about and get it past them. And it's terrifying. It's so terrifying, but writing was the thing that was, it helped me and still helps me to this day be able to just do it. One, it's a great stress reliever, and you work and you work and you work, and you're trying to figure out some of this stuff that doesn't have a right answer, and writing scientific papers and all this stuff, and sometimes it's all too much. So, and a lot of what I do is just get on my bike and go riding, and all this stuff just sort of floats around in your head and settles, and you come back from a ride and you're like, I figured out this thing I've been trying to think about for so long. So it's and now as a professor, I'm expected to produce research, publish research papers and lecture and classes and full of students, and then train PhD students. You have to come up with new ideas and new ways of thinking about things, and the only way that I can do that is by going out and riding my bike.
That's where you solve your problems.
Yeah, you're not thinking it. You're just trying not to, you're just trying to ride around.
Come home alive.
Yeah.
Come home in one piece.
And that stuff just sort of...
While scaring yourself at the same time.
Yeah. None of my great ideas have ever come sitting at my desk. They've all come out on my bike. And, not only is it just great for your mental health and keeps you fit, but my productivity is so much better because I'm active. And I don't make any apologies for not going in my office and sitting there. I'm out riding, and it helps me do what I can do. In fact, that's one of the reasons that I'm able to do what I do.
So is your time today mostly spent in the university? You're you're in Austin, Texas?
San Marcos, Texas,
okay.
about 20 miles south of Austin. Texas State University is about 45,000 students. Large, percentage of graduate students. We're one of the largest geography departments in the United States. So we teach. So there's 2 days that I'm teaching classes on campus, and the rest of the time, it's just basically up to me. I can work from home, write up my reports, produce new things.
Yeah, you're curious. Are you looking for another river that hasn't been dammed? Are you looking for? And what was the result of that? Can you spend a little more time on that?
Yeah,
exercise?
I mean, my PhD, like China is just this huge, huge country, and for many, many years they were bringing online 1 or 2 coal-fired power stations every week. So immense environmental problems. There's some some of the worst air quality anywhere on the planet. And they have the most hydroelectric potential of any country on the planet. So naturally, they would look to exploit their hydroelectric reserves and generate hydroelectricity, which is not totally carbon-free, but it's a much lower source of carbon. Like everything, there is a downside to that. You compromise a river's ability to do a lot of things by building a dam in it. But what I was interested in was can electricity, the byproduct of the dam, dramatically improve the quality of life of people who were living in the surrounding areas. And these were people with very, very, they were very, very poor, marginal housing. Could they stop using? They were just basically for heat burning just wood on the floor of their houses, it's really hard to breathe. Very, very smoky, high rates of pulmonary disease, lung disease. So is the provision of electricity just a sort of quantum leap in their living standards? And it's complicated like everything. In some ways it really was, and in other ways it wasn't the sort of golden ticket to, dramatically change their quality of lives.
Did you see, because you said you were there for about 5 years?
I did. My PhD was 5 years, but I went into the field various times, yeah.
Did you revisit places at the start and then see them at the end, or even have you travelled back there since?
Yeah,
see
absolutely.
What's happened?
Yeah. Roads, just by building the dam there, they had to build a series of roads to these villages, and just having roads, being able to move around, having cell phone towers. But people, prior to that, people would have to walk to the other side of, and these are huge, steep mountain valleys, like to get to one village, it could be sort of close as the crow flies. You have to go all the way down into the valley floor and then back up the other side. And people could just call each other.
Horse tracks or walking tracks.
Walking tracks.
There's not vehicle access.
There wasn't, no, when I first went there. And they could use cell phones to, do like day laboring, and motorbikes could get people to hospital quickly if they needed it. So, what I learnt is that I really knew nothing about energy. That's what a PhD should really teach you, is like how much you need to continue to find out and where you can keep asking questions. And, it's basically, you think that you're at the end point, you get this title, and you really just figure out that you're on the start of a really long journey to find out more stuff. And that was exciting. What my research really focuses on now is outages. So what happens when we're so reliant, in modern society on electricity and on, the 3 main types of energy is, fuel for vehicles, primarily heat, mainly natural gas, or you can be, create heat through electricity, but also electricity. And, look around this room here, everything's powered by electricity, and we're so reliant on it. And then sometimes it's just not there. And what does that mean for people? And for a lot of people that have become so reliant on it, I live in Texas in the summers. It's over 100 degrees for months on end every day. So if you have a major outage, that can either really compromise your health or it can kill you. You just overheat. And same if it happens in the winter time. There was a giant winter storm in Texas in 2021, and a lot of people simply froze to death. So that's what my research focuses on. What are the what are the sort of human implications of being so reliant on this system, and what happens when it's starting to fail?
And where does your hope and interest? I'm sure your brain could go in many directions. What's your biggest hope for the best direction?
The best direction is to do what's, to fragment the grid. The way that the electricity grid works, it's sort of built for another century, the previous century. Small micro scale, decentralized solar, rooftop solar batteries, not being so reliant and vulnerable. Because if you are reliant on something, you have a vulnerability. So a largely centralized system is vulnerable to a bunch of things: storms, cyber attacks, just human error, or just any type of failure. And if you have a system that's broken into many, many smaller pieces, you have more resilience. And that's what we need to do with the grid. And what's really driving my work is to try to find ways to protect the most vulnerable people. Energy is this thing, especially electricity, that really highlights the inequities in a society, because if you are wealthy, you can just sort of use it without really thinking about it. But
or you can afford to pay for it if you need to.
Correct. But if you're not, you might, energy poverty is even in the United States. You might live in the winter in, conditions that are cold. If you have a pre-existing sort of health, condition, that might exacerbate it. And in the summer, you might live with your thermostat. You can't survive in Texas without air conditioning. But if you're a low socioeconomic community, or a marginalized community member, you might live with your thermostat up high, which means that you're probably compromising your health. And what really drives my work is trying to find ways to improve the system. What are the communities and the people that need, the system to work better for them? And instead of coming in and trying to, tell them how that's going to be, we really work with them and have them guide us through what they think would work. Because quite often they've got answers. They've just never had anyone ask them.
Have you had some successes in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. Being able to identify at-risk communities and think about what types of systems would work best in particular places. Like, what is the geography of different regions, places tell us about what might be, what type of, is it a small solar system? Is it a micro wind turbine? Is it some sort of geothermal? Is it a mix? Really going to and figuring out you got to start with the communities. What are their needs? There's new innovations coming around all the time. There is this stuff, not even sure if it's in Australia yet, this stuff called plug-in solar. Sort of brings solar panels out of a box. You can set it up and move it around and just sort of plug it into an outlet, and it just might power a little part of your house. So that would work really well. If there is a major storm, we get sort of some pretty extreme weather in the southern part of the United States, hurricanes, tornadoes, all sorts of stuff. And they could be little systems that you could deploy in sort of hazardous, when sort of, hazardous events occur, or just, to communities that are unable to afford them.
And then it comes to an expense issue. Can you afford to have? Yeah, sure, it's great to have that, but how much does it cost? And
it would try and develop programs that would be able to provide these systems in some way.
What's your what do you think is? There's many options to produce energy. I'm not by no means proficient in this stuff, but there's many ways to produce it. What are some of the better ways, and why? And what are some of the worse ways? Now it's 2026.
Yeah. Ever since humans have created electricity, it has never been cheaper to produce electricity as it is now through solar PV photovoltaics. So in terms of economies, solar is by far the cheapest way. And the downside is, guess what? You can use it for, when the sun's shining. Or it's still when it's cloudy, but there will be a certain period of a day when you can't use that. But what that can do is reduce stress on the grid. And you can pair that with something else, whether that's wind. You can use battery storage.
If you could only pick one, if you're in a part of the land that you don't have access to expensive things, I can only spend my money on one thing to keep my house happy for the year. Again, you've got to assess your geography. Am I in the mountains? Am I in the flat? Am I wherever I am?
Yeah.
You look to your immediate environment first, and
Absolutely.
it would vary depending on where you're living.
Yeah, because if you live in a place that's water rich, then that would probably be some sort of small scale hydroelectric system. And these things, could be tiny, could be the size of a bucket. As long as you have something that spins the turbine around, you create electricity as long as you want. If you're in a place that's generally has a consistent wind stream, it might maybe be a small scale micro wind turbine. If you're somewhere that's volcanic, could be a lot of heat geothermal coming out of the ground. Or if you're in South Australia, it could be solar. A lot of sunshine, right?
I'm sure people want to know what's the cheapest way for me to get my electricity, because it's a cost to everyone everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, every place is different, and then it comes into what are the policies that would give you specific, feed-in tariffs and rebates and all this. But I would say largely it's probably solar.
And then that also leads to battery to store that additional energy.
The other thing about solar is, it doesn't, you just sort of set it up and it just sits there and works. Anything else, a turbine, a wind turbine, a hydroelectric, it moves. And if something moves, it's got bearings, which means that it breaks or has to get maintained. But solar just sits there. Not really any moving parts. Inverters, will sort of break after or stop functioning after a certain amount of time, but just sort of sits there and works. And really massive longevity in their systems, right? You have satellites that have been up there since 50s or 60s with solar panels on them, just still working, right?
Still going.
Yeah.
All right, step us back to some more adventures, travelling the world. I don't know how many stories we could tell. We could till my cameras run well flat.
Yeah.
But you travelled the world. Did you know the language? And maybe we'll specify it now to Afghanistan. Like, there's countries you've travelled through that right now are world headlines.
Yeah.
Does it make you sad to see? Like, you've seen places. Like, how does that make your heart feel?
Yeah, Syria was one. I mean, they've been in civil war for a long time until just sort of a couple of years ago. But a lot of these sites that I went to, like Palmyra and some of the end of the Silk Road in Syria, these, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, they got taken over. ISIS just sort of blew them up. And that's sad, but it's also sad to know that, there are people that just living in these cities and just suffer, victims of war. And I've been to these places and I know how wonderful and kind these people were. And again, just by virtue of the fact that they live there, they've had to go through these, horrible experiences. They're not part of, they're not soldiers, or they just get caught up in conflict. I remember going to Lebanon, going to Beirut, and it's a place that I'd heard about from the war, and, just still seeing evidence of buildings that had suffered so much heavy machine gun fire, they'd sort of collapsed in upon themselves. And, going to Israel and, speaking to Israelis and hearing, their perspective, and speaking to the Palestinians and hearing their perspective. And there's not really any right or wrong or easy sort of answers to this stuff. And And it's, ultimately what happens is that the people there just suffer. And it's a real shame. And that's why part of me is, a geography professor, because I think I looked at myself before I'd ever left Australia, and the world did look like a bit of a big scary place because I didn't know what was out there. And, I'm able to sort of bring the world into the classroom, and that's what I do is I help, make the world seem less foreign and less complicated and hopefully educate and inspire, young American college students to go out there and see these places and be a global citizen and maybe even do a bit of good in the world too.
Nice place to put yourself there. So in these travels, Tom, when you first left Adelaide, what, 99?
99, March 99, yeah, almost.
What, with a backpack and a ticket to
South Africa.
And once you got there, there's no internet. You can't look on Airbnb and book, or you weren't looking to do
none
that.
Of that. There was none of that.
You just, I'm going to land here, and you had a printed map.
Lonely Planet guidebook. Go to these towns. Here are these hostels to stay in. But you meet people. There's people out there doing this, and you make a network. And there's people from all over the world traveling and backpacking, and it's all set up. You just sort of fall into it, and you realize that it's actually pretty easy. It's actually really easy. It's up to you to just sort of go where you want, do the things you want to do. I wanted to go and see the Serengeti and all the animals out there, and did all that. And
you said you hunted tigers.
Didn't hunt them. Like we just wanted to find
the fire. You weren't hunting them.
Yeah. But I remember, there were all these things that happened that I wasn't prepared for, and like I went to Uganda. And we just were hitchhiking there from Kenya, and I jumped in with this guy driving a semi-trailer, and it was an aid truck, an aid organization, Swiss. And I was talking to the driver.
Well, you just hitchhiked, you just put your thumb out?
Yeah, some white dude just sitting on the side of the road. They were like, what's this guy? So got picked up by some Olympic, Kenyan middle distance runner, and then got picked up by this aid sort of truck. And I remember talking to the driver, and he was telling me, he was one of the first guys to go into Rwanda after the genocide there, and just things that really just changed my worldview and really challenged my worldview. I remember the first time I ever figured out I was white. I was in Malawi, and I was just walking down this street, and I found out later that I was actually in the wrong part of the city, and every single person just stopped what they were doing and turned around and stared at me. And I was like, oh, I really stick out here. And it was a little bit unnerving because I'd never, I'd lived in Australia my whole life up to that point where I was just like everyone else. And now I was really different. And so...
Did you feel scared?
Not at that particular... I found out later I should have when I told the person which street I walked down. They were like, oh, my God, you're really lucky that you didn't get, robbed or something. Yeah, I never...
In your travels, like you're going through the Middle East, did you... I remember you'd sent us... We had a bit of contact back then, and I thought, fucking hell, you're so brave. Well, it's surely it's got to be scary, but it didn't feel like that for you?
I remember being it's mainly in transportation, being in a bus up in the Himalayas.
The driver's going to go off the edge of the cliff.
Oh, my God, terrifying. You're looking, I was in a window and I could see the wheel almost dropping and just seeing, this 2,000 meter drop on the side. And I'm just I'm preparing to jump out. I'm like, well, if we
what's my exit strategy?
Basically, I remember that's the most scared I've ever been in my life. The closest that I felt I've come to death. But
not riding your bike through the middle of the desert at night, not knowing.
Nah.
Lions, tigers, gunmen.
Nah, none of that really. No, that was, and even mountaineering, doing some, I remember I soloed Mount Hood a couple times, just me, just being up there, you're on the, like this mountain, if you're on this mountain face, it's just you. And, you're a long way from anywhere. And if you fall, you're dead. But that, like, I've never felt so alive doing that stuff. I guess the risk was really there. But, you can't think about it because then if you do, you're likely to make a mistake. But mountaineering, yeah, the risk to reward ratio is pretty high and they're highly weighted towards the risk area.
Jumping forward to today, 2026, what's your family situation? Do you still take risks like that today? Tell us about Tom Ptak and family life today. Who's in your world?
Well, my wife, and she's clearly one of the most patient human beings on the planet, but has always been very, very supportive of me and the things that I do and says, you make good decisions. You do pretty comprehensive risk evaluation about what you're going to do. I have 2 girls. I ride my bike around. That's pretty risky in Texas. Probably the biggest risk is riding my road bike around.
Why?
Just the drivers.
Okay. Big trucks.
Oh
on the road
God,
there.
yeah. It's really crazy actually. So I try not to road ride as much, and mostly on the mountain bike. But that's just sort of like life.
Hasn't stopped you climbing or doing a solo climb, or you're more family oriented now, so they take precedence?
Yeah, and I won't say that I've sort of, I do stop and think about things, of course, and I always did. That's probably why I'm still sitting here. But I also think that, just going out and doing stuff in the world is worth the risk. Yeah, it's led me just on this amazing journey. And there's still so much of it that I've yet to see and explore. And that's, even just going out my mountain bike every day, you can still be amazed at little like places and trails that you might have never been before. And to me, that's exploring. Like, to me, any new place that I haven't seen before is exploration, whether it's 5 miles from your house or up in the Arctic in Norway. You're still seeing something that you haven't seen previously. So that's it doesn't have to be a crazy soloing sort of the north face of Mount Hood, but there's always sort of exploration there if you look for it.
I think I'll know the answer to this question. If you're riding your mountain bike, you seem fit enough. I'm assuming you haven't gone to the e-bikes yet.
I have not ridden an e-bike. No,
I wouldn't pick you to be.
Yeah,
you look too fit.
It's
to
funny.
Have an
I started. I raced. I entered a race last year for the first time since I left Adelaide in 1999, and it was like a cross country race. And I was like, I'm just curious to see what my body could still do. And it was about 95 degrees when the race started, and I won. And I went out there, but I got heat stroke. I just about cooked myself. I should have been so happy with how it went, but I just felt so awful because I was just so dehydrated. And I was leading up. I did this 100K race, actually. It was sort of leading up to that. And I was just curious to see what I could still do at my age. And that
How much do you ride on an average? You're saying you ride regularly?
Yeah.
And how long's that head cleaner for you?
Good couple hours. Doing, like, last year I rode for the year almost 7,000 miles, getting close. So averaging.
We're Australian here, sorry. Convert that to kilometres. Can you do that?
12.
Go on, Professor. No,
11,000, something like that, maybe. Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
And you love it, and you still love it.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be able to do what I do.
That's your main thing you come back to? Do you go to the gym or you do something else?
I definitely go to the gym. Yeah. I have to exercise every day. I definitely go to the gym, a couple times a week, but just cycling is so liberating. Like, you just you know this. You get out on your bike, you get on a trail, and all of the just garbage that you get sucked into in life just is gone, right? You're just,
so true.
all you care about is just ripping around a corner and just having fun, and it's so good for you. And then again, you know, for me, I come out of it and it's like, okay, I've got all these ideas that I'm not consciously thinking about. This just pop into your head. It relieves all the blockages of stuff you're trying to sort of sort through, and great.
So when it comes back to your students in the back of your mind, okay, it sounds like so you're making up the year as you go along. Like it's at the start of the year, you don't know what you're going to be teaching in August.
Yeah, they'll give you a schedule.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have a rough kind of plan.
Yeah.
You're talking through tell me.
2 classes every semester. I'm teaching my class on energy and my class on East Asia at the moment.
Explain, can you go through a little bit about what you're talking to your students about?
Yeah, so my energy class...
Professor Tom Ptak.
My energy class, we've got this really unique, we call it a simulation, where the students get in groups and they basically have to simulate running an energy system for a US state. They have this certain amount of power plants, and they go through 6 rounds, and they have to make sure that the amount of demand and supply match, because that's how the grid works. You can't have an imbalance or the grid, sort of shuts down. You got to keep your energy system profitable, and you've got to keep public opinion about 45%. That's just to get...
That's interesting.
Yeah, because there's a whole political, it's the politics. You want to get reelected. And then over the course of the term, they have to lower their emissions of the system. They can do that by adding and removing power plants. They've got to increase their energy security, and they've got to actually undertake what we call an energy transition. So they've got to phase out all of their non-renewable power plants, so coal, gas, and then they've got to transition 100% to renewables. And it's a lot of work for them. And then they, realize at the end of it, it's really hard to do. It's really, really hard to run and manage a giant system with all these competing demands.
I imagine it would be, but relevant.
Yes.
Incredibly relevant. And what age are these students that are applying this?
Anything from 18 to sort of 20s to later 20s too. And then my East Asia class, we read novels together.
To understand the language, explain that. That's not you talking to them about energy as well.
No, we do an energy component, but it's a class about Japan, Korea, and China. So
little Tom from Adelaide's talking to global students about 3 countries.
Yeah, and one of the joys of my career is that I figured out that I really just love to read. Like I have, my office is full of books, and it's basically the expectation. So we read a book in the Japan module together each week. One of the students will come in and lead a discussion on what happened, and
what topic in Japan, for example? What's the topic?
This is about...
What are the books vary?
The one on Japan is actually a really, really sad and confronting book. And it's about the Japanese occupation of Korea and Manchuria, and the issue of comfort women that were forcibly, Korean women that were forcibly basically kidnapped by the Japanese military in World War II and forced to serve as sex slaves, basically. And it's a very, very sad story, but what it does is it introduces the students to the realities of what happened in this part of the world historically, and helps explain some of the lingering geopolitical tensions between these countries. And then for the China section, we read a book called The Good Earth, which is It's still one of my favorite books of all time. It was by a Pulitzer Prize winning novelist, Pearl S. Buck, an American woman who lived in China. She was the daughter of missionaries, but lived there for many years and wrote many award-winning novels about life in sort of pre-revolutionary China and what it was like. So we read that together as a class, and it's again, if you could ever track down my geography teacher from high school and tell him this,
you're doing now,
I'm sure that they would there's no way you could convince them that this is possible. But, reading books with my students and taking them through, for a lot of them, it can be a really profound, university should be a very profound, transformative experience in their life. And a lot of them email me years later, I took your class and was inspired and went out and went to this part of the world, and I still remember this class, and I just sort of want to say thank you. And that's just so incredibly rewarding. I never ever thought that I
You'd
would
be that guy.
Yeah. Still don't. It still doesn't seem real to me.
You're not trying to be that guy at all. You're just trying to be you.
Yeah. And still, I got. I've been going to Norway a little bit recently. I got invited there to go to this research institute named after this famous Norwegian explorer, Fridtjof Nansen. And when I was there, I was like, well, if I'm going to go to Norway, I'm going to go up into the Arctic and see the Arctic Circle. And I still feel like it's a dream. Like, I got invited to come to this place to speak in front of these people and participate in this stuff. And I still feel like I'm just going to wake up from it. I'm like, I'm just a kid from Adelaide who somehow did all this stuff. It still doesn't seem real to me.
When you travel to these places, do you take photos, video? Have you got a crazy album of... Have you lost that? You good?
I think I've lost my headphones.
I'll try and give that a little spin on there.
It just went dead. I can't hear myself.
No?
Yeah. I don't know what happened. Oh, there it is.
You good?
Yeah, it came back.
There we go.
I'm back.
Yeah, I love taking photos and videos.
Yeah.
That's why I've ended up back here 30 years later. I could imagine you would have some pretty cool places. Where are some... you've been to plenty of special places, but are there photos you would go, do you want to be in the moment, or do you want to take a photo of the moment? How do you find that?
Yeah, sometimes you can do, back in the day before it was digital, you'd have to put a lot more effort. Now everyone's just uses their phone.
When you travelled through all your countries, that was not a thing.
No, pre-internet, a lot of this stuff. I still, I'm being at Everest base camp on the Tibetan side, and you're just sort of standing there looking up at this wall of, there's this giant mountain, and just looking at the highest place in the world. And I'd been on the Nepalese side and did some, we climbed a couple of peaks there. It was just me and a buddy, that guy from the States, without, just doing it all ourselves. And you're up around, over 6,000 meters looking right over to Everest. And it's just like, is this really happening? That sort of stuff, and I've got some amazing images. It just sort of looks otherworldly. But I use a lot of them in my classes. Not to, definitely not bragging, but like, hey, we're talking about this place. This is what it looks like. Here are these experiences. I think that's the students really, really like to see and hear about my experiences there, rather than just like teaching about it through a textbook or whatever.
Yeah, real learned experience.
Yeah.
Who are the nicest, some of the nicest cultures or people in those early days, again, riding the bike?
Yeah.
With next to nothing with you, just enough to survive and sleep on the side of the road. What's some really fond memories in that time?
I think, I think most people are just generally, welcoming to travelers. That's what I've found everywhere. I mean, you've been to Bali a lot, right? And some people are, you're not in the over-touristed areas, they're just really thrilled for you to be there and visit their place. I remember being in Turkey and just one guy invited me to come up and camp on his property. That happens all the time. And the amount of kindness that I had in Syria, people just stopping me and they were just thrilled that I was there. They just wanted to talk to me and find out about my country and the people, one of the things that I learned from my PhD that wouldn't show up in any academic paper or, was this community that I lived with. They were very, very impoverished. And they were the most generous people I had ever been around in my life. Hospitality in a lot of these parts of the world is not just something that you say, it's a fundamental part of their culture. If a stranger comes to your house, you don't refuse them. You welcome them in. And, I'd go out there. I was doing interviews with them and it was a real honor for them to have me come in. So the first thing they do would crack a beer for me and just put it in front of me.
Is this in China? Is this when you were doing that? Yeah.
And then they'd start like hunting down a chicken so they could kill it. And I was like, I'm like, please don't, kill that on and cook it for me. I'm fine. But it was a big honor for them. So I was fed everywhere and just how they interacted with each other. They're all very, they were sort of agrarian people. They had small plots of land. They all had like animals, pigs and stuff, and they were always working. But the minute that someone walked through their door, a friend, they all stopped what they were doing and then went and served them tea or beer or food because that was so important to them. And if you didn't do that, then people would stop coming over to visit you. And I remember just reflecting on that going back to the United States, and we're all just sort of sectioned off in our own little houses, and it's just so different. And they came together for all these community events, and there was just this sense of they may have not had material possessions like we had, but they were so connected as a community. It was really inspiring to sort of see. They really delighted in being around each other all the time and participated in these rituals and festivals and things that they'd been doing for eternity, really.
A few things we seem to be missing in our modern world.
I remember asking my PhD advisor was Chinese, and I said to him, what's the biggest thing that you notice over here living in Oregon? He's just like, there's no one on the streets. There's no one outside. You just sort of drive your car into your garage and shut the door, and then you felt really sort of,
isolated.
Yeah.
No community.
No.
If there was a problem, you wouldn't trust that your neighbour's going to come and help,
Yeah. You just sort of keep to ourselves, and, that suspicion of strangers in other countries, it's just like, no, come in. And, I remember like first traveling and I was like, oh, this person being like, skeptical. They just want to fleece me, for something. And then I'm just like waiting for them to be like, all right, can you give me some money or can you do this? And they're just like,
no, we just want to help.
Yeah. And I felt really ashamed about that. It's just like I brought my biases into that viewpoint of the world. And it was just like, oh, they're just genuinely sort of, I would never have done that. Just invite a stranger into your house. Right?
No. People definitely don't. Even if you're kind of half nice, like, oh, I'm kind of busy. I'm doing something.
Yeah. So then again, like you just constantly being challenged in your way of thinking when you're out there doing stuff, and which means that you're always learning, and that's essentially what I love. Like I'm just a student at heart. You never arrived at a point that you've figured stuff out. You're just constantly challenged all the time, and you've always got more stuff to learn, and that's sort of my job, my career, whether it's a book.
Now you're getting paid,
Yeah.
Are you going to write a book one day?
No one, it's so hard.
Have you asked that?
I have. No, I don't think anyone.
It's
great. It's fine. I don't think anyone reads books anymore.
No. Audio book?
Maybe. I don't know.
You speak really well. You so many interesting things. I'm sure if you found a way to harness that into information, people would be pretty interested in that.
Maybe. I still suffer from that, do I really have I always compare myself to others, and you look at what other people have done and you think, God, I haven't done it.
Maybe they feel the same.
Yeah, but then you read other people's books and you're like, I've done stuff that's way more interesting than that.
Cool than that. Yeah. We partied at Mount Buller. You haven't done that.
But I look back on those years, man, they were, and I've had all these amazing experiences after that. But in terms of raw fun, I cannot remember a time when I was that happy and that thrilled to be around a group of people doing I would just live for those races. They were just, I remember some of those days, one was at Marble Hill and it was like a wet race and everyone was coming down this chute and just crashing and everyone's
there just enjoying it together.
Yeah. And, you'd come down doing your run and people were hiding behind trees, blowing, smoke in your face as you're going past or throwing things at you. And we would just
There was no competition. It was a competition, but we weren't competing.
Yeah, but look at the technology. Like I look at, you see this footage back then of the bikes we were riding. I mean,
they looked all wrong.
You were just almost
big
laying.
guys on these little bikes.
They were so skinny. They were so unstable. Tiny bars, barely any suspension. But we didn't care. We were just having an absolute blast. I remember that period. Every week, a new fork came out with more travel, a new bike, a new linkage system, a new suspension. It was a lot of innovation, a lot of experimentation.
Really quickly.
Yeah, a lot of experimentation. And, we were just out there doing stuff and just having a riot. There was no money in it. You'd win a race and get a pair of socks or something.
Yeah,
It wasn't
cross-country tyre.
It wasn't about that, right? It was...
Oh, you could beat your mates. You had bragging rights at having a beer in the car park afterwards,
Yeah, but when I ride my bikes now, the technology is insane. Like if our bikes back, just ride a trail bike or an all mountain bike, it probably has more active suspension than almost anything I rode back in the day. And, bigger rims, 29, it's wider bars, everything's so much stable.
Changed.
Yeah.
Changed
Yeah, so much tech, dropper posts, all this stuff.
It's progressed a long way in 30 years.
A lot.
What's the next two going to be? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, have we reached...
How much more can you progress?
Yeah, how many more gains can they make? But, there's a huge sort of high school mountain bike sort of community in the United States, National Intercollegiate Association of Mountain Bikes. And yeah, it's, there's just no downsides to it, to me.
No, to any of us that ride bike, there is no downside. Like I say, clears the head, you're having a shit day, just go ride.
Yeah.
Just go ride. You forget, you just got to concentrate.
Yeah.
On where you're going.
It sort of started, again, I did a race a couple of weeks ago, and it's just, it's just good people. Everyone's friendly. It's just mountain bikers. They're just cool. There's just cool guys that are out there. Essentially, we're just sort of riding our bikes around forests. It's still fun.
Definitely.
Yeah.
From forests to the deserts again, you said you were travelling soon after September 11.
Yep.
How did it feel going through those countries? Like you became aware at some point they would have been looking at you because I'm sure there's hostility there. How did you feel received when you're in the middle of those places, in the middle of that rebound?
Yeah, I don't think anyone was really outwardly hostile. It's really interesting because you go to cities like Jerusalem and all the, like places in Jordan and Syria, and they've all had, predominantly Muslim, but you've got a Christian quarter, a Jewish quarter. They've all lived side by side for thousands of years, right? And it's really only this contemporary thing where we've drawn borders around places of the earth and called them countries. And, this has really sparked conflict, especially in this part of the world post-World War II. But, I'm trying to think back if anyone was ever sort of hostile to me just because I was foreign.
They didn't recognise you as, maybe he's blaming us for what's going on over there.
Not
Have you
really.
never felt that?
No. I think they're
And to this day, have you gone and travelled there again since?
I haven't been there probably since, 2001. Yeah.
You're curious to go back?
I am, but there's so much
enough on the.
So much more I want to see too.
Yeah.
Places that I haven't been.
That's your curiosity, is the place you haven't been to. You don't want to revisit the place.
I'll definitely revisit some of them, but I have less time now, right? I've made it to 6 continents. I would love to get to Antarctica. So I need to figure that out. But there's still, you could say I'm well traveled, but if you actually looked at all the places that I'd been on the world, it's still a tiny amount, right? When you consider how big places.
I think mine's a lot. I've got a lot less dots on this
Right.
planet than you do.
Yeah, but like all of Central Asia is a blank spot on the map for me. Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all part of the Silk Road, and Russia. Never been to Russia. Probably won't go right now. Parts of South America like Ecuador and Colombia and Peru, those sorts of places. And
when you've travelled those places, you're saying it's mostly solo and you've met people along the way.
Yep.
But even in China, that's not. How long ago was that? How long have you been there for?
I started going there in 2007, 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You spent some time there, and then you settled back into Texas. Roughly when you?
We've only been in Texas for 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I lived in Oregon for about 9 years, did my master's and my PhD there, then lived in northern Idaho for 4 years. I was a professor at the University of Idaho. It's epic riding there. A little town called Moscow had this place, Moscow Mountain. I could ride there from my house, 100 miles, a single track sort of on my doorstep. But it was super, you could do that. But in the wintertime, it's like, minus 20. And I actually could ride. I actually rode in minus 20. I had a fat bike, the bike.
Yeah.
And they would actually go out to the trails, and they had this like groomer, and they would groom these mountain bike trails, ride around. And I could remember I could go for about 45 minutes. And after 45 minutes, even with all of my, I couldn't feel my fingers or my
Blood
toes.
flowing, yeah.
No, none, it was gone. So I said, all right, I'll get another 15 minutes. But riding around in minus 20 is like being out there in the forest, and it's just so quiet. All you can hear is the wind. And a lot of the evergreens, it's still, you've still got cover out there. But that was certainly an experience. But Texas is the opposite. In the summer, it's... we had a summer just 2 years back. There was 100 days over 100 degrees, so more than 3 months over 100 degrees, and we had 32 days straight over 105. So 32 days in a row that it was almost, either 40 or above. So it's just insane how hot it is. I have to get up and leave at 5 in the morning to go ride.
And that's still playing on your mind, the energy consumption to cool you when you get home, to keep the house cool in summer and warm in winter, and all of that interrelated.
Yeah, Texas is a great state to study energy because it's the second biggest state in the United States in terms of oil and gas, but it's the number one. Like Alaska produces more raw, you can extract more. More is extracted in Alaska. Second is Texas. We have the most refining capacity in the United States. Or you go down to Houston, some of the largest oil refineries on the planet. They're gigantic. And then you drive from Houston East Texas down into Louisiana and down into Mississippi, and it's all refinery and petrochemical stuff. But Texas is second in oil and gas production, number one in refining, but we're also the number one state with renewable energy. There is literally, you drive into West Texas and you can drive for like 8 hours and it's just you are constantly surrounded by wind turbines. It's the number one state for wind generation in the United States. There's just thousands upon thousands of wind turbines and gigantic solar farms. Number two in solar, but anticipated to be number one soon, and huge deployment of industrial-sized battery systems now. So the solar will charge the batteries during the day, and then they'll discharge it during the night because the size of demand on the Texas grid is about 58 gigawatts, which is bigger than most countries.
And is that sustainable in your view? I mean, are wind times, they have a limited lifespan. Like, are these, you're a professor in these things, like, what's your comment on, in that environment, you've got the space.
Yeah.
You can put the turbines, whatever you're doing to the land and the environment, solar panels, you're taking up space that was unused, assuming otherwise. But they have a limited lifespan.
They do.
There's a graveyard for all these wind turbines and things like that.
There's a huge one in Texas, actually. Yeah. Basically nothing we're doing as humans is sustainable right now. And that's, the saddest thing about what I study for a living is that we're driving ourselves off a cliff, right? More and more and more stuff. Carbon emissions, the last 10 years have been that every year records are broken for the wrong reasons. We have, fairly conclusively, although as scientists we won't say that there is 100% certainty that carbon emissions, increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, increases in, more heat, but it is fairly conclusive, and we are continuing to make the planet hotter, and we are continuing to stretch the sort of biophysical capacity of the Earth to, do the things that, have taken thousands of years. So, the Earth wasn't always this temperature, right? It was
fluctuated,
frozen, right, at one point, and it was the greenhouse effect that had created what's called the Goldilocks conditions over a very long period.
We went to school.
Yeah.
That was the big thing, wasn't it?
Created the right temperatures for us to live, for human life to flourish, and agriculture, and in a pretty short amount of time, we've, changed that equilibrium in the Earth's, what we call Earth systems. Even if, all of the best scientists and energy, scientists are saying that we would have to basically be at net zero in 2050 to stave off the worst effects of human-induced or anthropogenic climate change. And we have made some good progress, but by and large, we're sort of headed in the wrong direction. And that's, sad when I think about the sort of climate that my kids will have to deal with and what that might mean for their lives. But, everything has a cost, even if you're right. The whole thing with energy is you can't get something for nothing. So wind turbines, huge amounts of carbon fiber and metal and steel and gearboxes, they require oil too. They need oil changes. Solar has all of these rare earths and glass and lithium and cobalt, and batteries require all this stuff. We just got to stop consuming stuff. That's, but... And that's why...
What is the answer? Where is the... Yeah, I mean, we're talking, if that's 2050.
Yeah.
25 years away,
Go and ride your bike. That's the thing. Like, get on a bike. Like, that's why, again, I take it back to cycling. That's some of, you just walk around and look at everyone and they're just staring at their phones. Think about how transformative mountain biking or any type of cycling is. You know, you go out there and you have these incredible experiences. Even just, you know, you don't have to be racing downhill. You don't have to be doing some...
Just in the forest.
Just cruising around.
Riding down the beachfront, whatever.
Right. And I think if you ask most people, they'll say that's so much more rewarding than having your head stuck in some app or social media or something. But, you know, look at what folks are doing more and more is they're spending so much time on their phones. It's making them unhappy. And what's the answer? Just go out or it doesn't have to be riding. Go walking, go hiking, do whatever. Get out there. Leave your phone behind. Turn it off.
You don't need a vehicle. You don't need petrol to fuel your legs. You know, you need good food, healthy food.
Just making it simple is part of the answer. We think it's really complicated, but just do less.
But who wants to give that up? I've got a big car. I've got a second car. I've got to tow the trailer.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. We need to find some balance, right?
That's all right.
We don't want to go back and live in caves again, right? I don't think anyone's going to do that. But we need to just get. I mean, at some point, the Earth is just going to say, "I've had enough," right? And that's the unfortunate thing is that when that happens, the way that all of the Earth's biophysical systems are connected, there will be some sort of cascading effect. And we can't just say, all right, we're going to stop now. It's going to be, well, too late. You know, the Gulf Stream collapsed and this is what's happened.
We've got this algae bloom in South Australia, there's floods, there's fire all around the world. There's all these extreme weather events. Mm-hmm. You know, it's been 25 years since I've seen you. Yeah. Let's suggest we teleport 25 years in the future. We're suggesting the world is in dire straits in that. I mean, 25 feels long, but it's not that long. It's in dire straits
now. Yep. I mean, a lot of people have already, you know, this is already happening. Extreme heat in a lot of the world. A lot of people who are just, you know, walking down the street and somewhere and this giant wall of water just comes down and this stuff's already happening. This is what makes the sort of urgency of trying to how to figure out these new energy systems and how to protect people when they go out or doing things better is even more important.
At the same time, we're consuming more and we want more.
Yeah. I mean, I jumped on a plane to come here, right? So, and that's what I say to my students, like, please don't think that I'm, you know, virtuous. If you look around the world globally, probably one of the top emitters, right? So it's hard like the mental gymnastics that I have to do to sort of.
You said you've seen the factory, you've seen the coal plants in China, you know, 20 years. You've seen how they produce fuel in the flesh. You know,
right.
It's easy to see it on your phone or on the internet.
Yeah.
You've seen it in person and it's like, well, what's the right answer? It's hard to say.
Yeah, and that's the thing is it's hard when you come from a Western industrialized country is that like everyone wants to have the quality. And that was going back to me going out, you know, traveling to Africa for the first time and other parts of the world. They want, of course, it's only natural. People want to have good things, right? I remember the Dalai Lama saying that is a natural desire because things can make your life more comfortable, right? But there has to be at some point individually you start, this is going into Buddhist philosophy.
Discomfort.
You start desiring things and you become unhappy when you don't have them and they become more detrimental. And I think on an individual level, you know, I really try to practice that. I really, really try to make good decisions about what things I consume. Bikes are my only exception. But I use them like cycling gear. My bikes, I use them so much. I know they have a carbon cost. I understand that, but I ride my bikes so much that I feel that, and it's important to have the right gear when you're doing it. But I really try to sort of limit the things that I do in other parts of my life as well. So try to maybe practice what I preach a little bit. how have you seen the mountain biking evolve? I mean, I've kept my eye, obviously, before when I left, there was no Eagle Mountain Bike Park.
Yeah, none of that.
There was no sort of Troy Brosnan winning. I mean, it's just amazing that I've watched all that happen from afar. I remember racing, and like Nathan Rennie, I remember Chris Kovarik seeing him at Buller. You remember that time? And we were just like, who?
I'm still in touch with Nathan now.
Who is this Chris Kovarik? This kid came down and just like. I remember at the time it was Michael Ronning, Scott Sharples, and no one could beat them. And we're at Buller once, and this Chris Kovarik kid came down and just absolutely obliterate. I'd never seen anyone ride a bike like that. There was that bowl right down at the bottom near the finish line, and he went through there in a way that I was just like, what have I just seen? And, Nathan Rennie. And then I sort of left, but I would watch them sort of on the World Cup circuit. And then there's this Adelaide kid, Troy Brosnan, just,
he was coming through as I was kind of stopping, like he was the super junior and
one of the fastest guys on the planet. And Connor
him
Fearon.
And Connor, and I was chatting to someone the other day, and they come from Adelaide, like the rest of the world. How they come in France, they come in Italy, actually with real mountains, proper mountains. We've got Mount Lofty.
But it just speaks to the quality of the trails and the community and the races around here. It can't be an accident, right? That, there's something special. And that's what I keep thinking about. There is something, I have been out and seen the world and been out and living in the world, but there is something very special about Adelaide, South Australia. And there's a lot more trails here, and there's a lot more people riding bikes here. O'Halloran Hill Mountain Bike Park, Eagle Mountain Bike Park, all this stuff.
Fox Creek, like places where you can't, because it was mostly illegal. The days when you were here, you couldn't ride legally. In Mount Lofty, you weren't even allowed to ride your mountain bike down
We did
Mount
the
Lofty.
first ever race at Fox Creek. Remember building that first trail down through the
bowl section.
Yeah, you had all. I mean, part of riding was like, let's go up and get chased by rangers, and it was like a badge of honor, like that. You'd never get caught, but it was you were always going on illegal tracks, right? But now I guess people have sort of understood how much of a big business cycling can be, and the economic impact and the health impact, which is great because there's a bit of validity there to what we were doing back in the day. This isn't, and that was something that I remember always being upset about. Like, what is it that we're doing that's so wrong? We're just riding our bikes through the bush. Like, just let us do it, right? We're just riding our bikes along these trails that you rarely see anyone use. Why would you want to police that? And now they're like, whoa, we're going to make a park for you.
Yeah. Because I didn't realise they could make money out the back end of it.
Yeah, but they hate, it was just this, they really resisted allowing us to do that stuff, which was a real shame.
And maybe now the problem is electric bikes and the use of them in the public environment. We're not talking dirt roads, we're talking city streets, and maybe it's a new problem that we've got to work with, but there's always going to be a new problem. Yeah,
and I think the e-bike thing is like, if people are getting out of their cars onto e-bikes, then absolutely do it. Anything that gets people out of their vehicles is a good thing, right?
100%.
For all of the reasons that we've discussed.
Yes. Coming from a professor that knows about energy and its useful places.
Yeah, and I think e-bikes can be really powerful because you can have those big cargo bikes and you can move a lot of goods and a lot of people, in ways that you can, I have noticed like how much more traffic there is than when I left here. A lot more cars on the road, right?
Little old Adelaide.
Yeah.
I was thinking, all your travels through the world, things don't always work out. What's one of the times when things really weren't working out, and how did you get out of that?
I remember on my very first year around the world, I was in Morocco and I got really, really sick, like hospitalized sick, thought I was going to die. felt like I was going to die. Thought I was going to die.
And you're by yourself?
I was actually with this guy, Ian McKenney, who I haven't seen since that trip. I have no idea where he is or what he's up to. And I looked back on it. I just patted this dog on the side of the street and then opened like an orange apple juice container and must have got a germ off the dog or something and put the container in the car, and then later in the day grabbed the apple juice container and took a drink and was like, oh, my stomach doesn't feel good. And a couple of days later, after being in pretty bad shape, waking up in the middle of the night and just saying to Ian, like, you got to get me to hospital, dude. I feel like I'm about to die. And going to hospital and sort of getting rushed into some room and, I was just critically dehydrated. But I remember them like just putting a drip in my arm. And I remember just saying to Ian, because he spoke French, like, just make sure they use clean needles of a syringe, I don't want, you'd heard all these stories. And then they put this drip in my arm and I could feel the sort of saline going in, and I was so dehydrated and the water was so cold. I sort of started having this shaking fit, just going, gritting my teeth and just like, and then just blackness. And I remember like waking up the next morning and just looking around. I looked down at the end of my bed and I'm like, oh my God, I'm alive. And Ian was down there and he jumped up. He's like, you're alive. And I'm like, what? I thought I was going to die. He's like, I was freaking out, man. And I remember it took me, and we were just like, let's get out of here. Let's go back to Spain. And for the next 2 weeks after that, all I wanted to do was drink Sprite. My body was just, and I was like, maybe this traveling stuff's not for me. I'll just sort of go back to Australia. And I gave it a go. I saw the world, and I didn't. I had this ticket to London. I'm like, all right, I'll just go to London and see what happens there. And turns out I ended up living there for about 3 years.
Big adventurous spirit. Hey,
Yeah.
You've travelled, you've done lots, seen lots. Hey?
And I think that's a big, that's one of the things I learned in mountain biking, that you just got to be resilient. You don't know. You got to figure stuff out. Like, you're not sure how it's going to work out, but you can just, you might do a race 1 week and do really poorly. It doesn't mean that that's going to be like that the next time. And there just was all those lessons that I learned doing all this stuff, mountain biking in Adelaide, that I sort of applied to all these other things in my life as well. Like when I go to an academic conference and you have to go and present on your research, and, there's all of these brilliant people in the room and you have to teach them something new. And they're all experts and they're all professors at, these big universities. And again, that's terrifying. Like if you think being at the start line in a mountain bike race is terrifying, think about getting up in a room in front of people and can, provide some sort of compelling story about something in a way that they hadn't thought of before. And, I take a lot of the lessons from mountain biking into that just practicing over and over and over and being resilient and if you get something wrong once, trying to correct it or do it, just practicing lines. It's the same thing. You look at all those experts that are racing, the Troy Brossons of the world, like nothing is left to error. They are, perfectionists at their trade. And it's sort of the same thing for me. Like you have to be on your game all the time. You can't just get up there and like, well, I'm just going to tell you this story. You would just get laughed out of there. So sort of the same thing. And applying a lot of the sort of same techniques and strategies as you would do in a bike race to us in a professional context. So
could you look back at before you left South Australia, the 20-year-old Tom Ptak, did you have any idea of the things that you would end up doing?
Well, I would say I don't think anyone had an idea, right? Could have anyone have seen this happening? But I would say my mum always did. My mum always said to me, you have potential and you're going to do great things and I sort of believe in you. And I just always thought that was the thing that mums say, to be supportive. But, it turns out I guess she was right. and she always sort of saw this, just person that wanted to, figure out all this stuff, and probably just at that point didn't really know what it was.
I'm sure she would have missed you. I'm sure you left her young.
Yeah.
I'm sure that would have been equally difficult.
Yeah, and she supported me so, like, I used to call her ground control. I'd be in, like, some country and my passport got stolen and I'm like, Mom, I'm in this pickle. Something happened. Like, I need you to help, or I need you to do this, do something with this consulate. Over 30 years, there's inevitably going to be things that go askew somewhere, right? And my mum was always that person that had everything sort of locked down. And funnily enough, she actually came over to London and lived in London. And when I was living there, because she's like, well, my mum and my stepdad, she was like, well, you're doing it, so we want to do it too. And she came to China. I have one of the most, one of the best days I'll ever remember traveling. I was in Tibet, and I took my mum way out into sort of Western China and Eastern Tibet, into these really very rural and remote parts, and just hired this guy's motorbike one day, and me and my mum were just cruising up through just the Tibetan plateau on this at like 15,000 feet elevation, just exploring together. It was really an incredible experience, seeing these incredible landscapes, finding like nomads just, moving around with their yaks, and just, a lot of the places there weren't any roads, you're just sort of cruising around out there. And yeah, my mum was able to come out and sort of experience that with me, which was really, really cool.
Sounds like a bloody, such a cool life. I think I struggle to find someone that's lived such an interesting life across from me, and it's been fucking such a cool conversation to have here.
Yeah.
What is on the horizon for Professor Tom Ptak?
More of the same. I've got a really interesting sort of project that I'm working on I have this colleague, definitely one of the most brilliant people I've ever been around. His name's Dr. Steve Radel. He's a geographer. His analytical thinking is just next level. And every time I'm around him, we're good mates, actually. We went to Korea and Japan 2 summers ago. We were professors at the University of Idaho previously. Last year we went up to the Arctic together, Norway, Finland and Sweden, and looked around at stuff up there. And he's a political geographer. He studies conflict. And I'm an energy geographer, and he's much more technical in his ability to sort of analyze data and use modeling techniques and programming languages. We're doing this super interesting project looking at the way that Russia has systematically targeted Ukraine's energy infrastructure as an act of warfare. And we're looking at how a big part of Russia's strategy in the war to gain territory has been by basically attacking energy systems. And energy system, in a lot of conflict, you've seen evidence of folks attacking energy facilities, even back to the first Gulf War where all the oil wells were lit on fire. But we've never seen a conflict that energy has been used as a tool of war in this way before. Russia has been bombarding Ukraine's grid, these centralized power stations for 4 years now, and subjecting as a way to harm the population. And Ukraine's response is to sort of decentralize their grid to make it harder to attack. So we're doing a project that's really using spatial modeling and analysis to try to figure out some sort of patterns of Russia's war against Ukraine. And so we'll probably go to Europe, to Poland and Hungary, and meet people, and that's, the sort of thing that I do. And just more of the same, more exploring and more learning.
Well, I think that's pretty bloody inspiring, you young little fucking whippersnapper from here in Adelaide. Look, I think we're going to call this a wrap. We could keep going forever, but
For sure.
you got things to do. We're a short time here in Adelaide.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
It's been
for
a real,
coming and
you're
visiting.
welcome. You're so welcome.
And talking and
It's been a real
sharing
pleasure.
your experiences with us. I wish you more of the same, more interesting, more curiosity. Professor Tom Ptak, thank you so much
Thanks for having
coming
me,
and
man.
visiting me. Is there a little final inspiring word to share with our few listeners that we have here? Send us out.
You know, if I can do it, you can. I really encourage everyone to just go out there and go and see what you can learn about the world. It's hard to be disappointed.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tom
course.
Ptak. You.
Thank you so much, man.
That was fucking cool. That was
Yeah.
cool. I love doing this stuff.
Yeah.